Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Geo-Institute live stream. I'm very excited for this one. Today, we're featuring Books Rock. This one is in partnership with ASCE Publications. Before we move on with our speakers and partners, I have a few announcements, so please stay here. Institute live stream. As you guys may know, the Geo-Institute is part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. ASCE have about 9 technical institutes, as well technical advancements. If you want to know more about the other institutes and more about ASCE, you can visit asce.org. If you want to know more about the Geo-Institute, we have around 12,000 members, and mostly geotechnical engineers, engineering geologists, soil technicians, and more. So you can visit geo-institute.org and see our technical committee, board committees, where are our chapters around the United States. And if you want to join any of them, more information is in our website. We currently have a campaign. We have our Raoul Pet bobblehead. If you want to get one, this is a limited edition. You can visit the Geo-Institute website and go to the student participation fund, and get your own bobblehead. We have other gifts in there, so just check it out. Here it is. We have some conference coming up. We are very excited. We're celebrating 30 years at GeoCongress next month. We are going to be in Salt Lake City. If you want to know more, visit geo-congress.org for the technical program, what to expect at the Congress. We are already working for ASCE 2027, which will be in Philadelphia, March 1st to 5th, 2027. This one is Geo-Institute and all institute as well, the technical events. The call for abstract is currently open until March 4th. So please visit the website is experience.asce.org. More information is in there. I think the abstract is around 500 words. And we're looking for this experience. It will be great. So I don't have more further announcements. Now I want to introduce the Director of Publications Marketing, Leslie Conley. Leslie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina. I'm going to talk just briefly about ASCE's publications program and share a slide here, so just bear with me. Okay. So ASCE is a leading publisher of civil engineering content. We publish books, standards, and conference proceedings. Today, we're here to talk about this book, Geotechnical Baseline Reports. It's a manual of practice, 154. Manuals of practice are distinguished by the review process performed by a blue ribbon panel of experts. That gives these books authority, and MOPs present in-depth technical information and provide detailed analysis of a described method or technology, and in this case, the role of geotechnical baseline reports in allocating and managing risk associated with subsurface construction. We're offering our viewers today a 10% discount if you use the QR code provided here and the discount code ASCE Pub 2026, that will be applied. That's it for me, and I will turn it back over to you, Christina. Thanks so much.
Yay, thank you, Leslie. Please get your copy. I have my own. As you guys may know, I did some geotechnical consulting in the past. I'm really missed to be there. Not that much, but I think it's really good. It's a good publication to have in your office for your technicians, like the ones you've sent to the field, like to take notes. Those is really good to have. So now I would like to introduce our moderator for this live stream, Tim Siegel. Tim is the CEO and Senior Principal at Dan Brown and Associates. Tim, good to see you. Thanks for doing this for us today.
See you, Christina.
All right, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Well, it's really my pleasure to be talking with Randy Essex today about his book, Guidelines on Geotechnical Baseline Reports. To give you a little bit of background on Randy, He's a tunneling and risk management consultant with more than 48 years experience, providing services to design, construction, engineering, and dispute resolution. He holds a BS degree from University of Rochester and MS and ME degrees from the University of California at Berkeley. He's registered in several states. He's a member of the Moles, the Beavers, and the Dispute Resolution Board Foundation. And he's a former chairman of the Underground Technology Research Council and former VP and now fellow of the International Tunneling Association. His 50 publications include 3 ASCE publications on geotechnical baseline reports and a GBR publication in the UK. Hi, Randy.
How's it going, Tim?
It's good to see you.
Likewise. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics.
Oh, I can tell. We talking to you earlier, you were just busting the seams to tell us about geotechnical baseline reports. So let's hop into it. Just to kind of get us started, could you give us a brief summary of a thumbnail sketch of your book?
Absolutely. I've got a couple of slides, should take maybe 8 to 10 minutes, and tell me when you see it.
No
should
problem.
Take a minute.
We'll hang in there for sure.
Has it appeared?
It's coming up now. We see it now.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's get into it. If the slides would only advance, I don't believe it. It's Murphy. Well, these are the topics. They'll be short and snappy. Let's talk about historical perspective. I'll borrow the title of a song by Barbra Streisand, "The Way We Were." In the 70s, owners of underground projects, highway tunnels, transit tunnels, water tunnels, they thought the best way for them to survive the industry was to shed all the risk to the contractors. And the favorite expression was, you bid it, you build it. Here's the data, make your own interpretations, and tell me when you're done. Contractors in a competitive environment bid optimistically, and they filed differing site condition claims. We'll talk about that. When their actual costs exceeded their bid prices. Litigation spiraled, the lawyers got rich, the owners suffered in reputational risk, and some of the contractors frankly went out of business, or they got out of the tunneling industry altogether because it was one-sided. The US tunneling industry said, if we keep doing what we're doing, people are no longer going to buy our product. And so there were a series of research reports, the first in 74, the second in 84, and they were produced under the National Academy of Sciences. And then 2 more reports in 89 and 91, and they were produced under this Underground Technology Research Council, which was under the auspices of the construction division at that time of ASCE. But all 4 documents, I was chairman for a while of the Underground Technology Research Council, but all 4 of these documents basically rallied around including 4 key improved contracting practices for underground projects only: differing site condition clause, a geotechnical report that's binding in the contract, not for information only, something called escrow bid documents, and a dispute review board. Actually, dispute review boards and GBRs grew up as cousins in the early 80s and into the 90s. But my focus is going to be on geotechnical reports. The industry knew from experience that traditional foundation reports by geotechs, and I was a trained geotech, so I can point the finger at myself. Traditional foundation reports were inadequate, and that a guidelines publication was needed to help guide authors in how to write geotechnical baseline reports to act as a risk allocation document, not a design document. So the industry said, we need this guideline, and I raised my hand. This was in 95. And I gathered a steering committee, and with guidance from a number of my mentors in ASCE business, Pete Douglas, Joe Sperry, Al Matthews. I had great guidance. We pulled together a document, and it was an industry publication. It involved 2 public workshops at tunneling conferences where we basically sent a Word manuscript out to the attendees, and they could give us track change edits. And we said, make it better. How do you make it better? And we did this for all 3 publications. Well, the first one was published under UTRC in 1997. And it was, I had asked that we make it gold, and ASCE in those days didn't want to dabble in metallic colors. So the gold book came out as canary yellow, okay? But 10 years later, we produced an update because the industry was saying, this is great, but there's a lot of lessons learned in applying the yellow book, and we need a new edition. And so I brought together a different set of steering committee. And by this point, ASCE was willing to give me a few stripes of metallic gold. So we actually able to call it the Gold Book. And then 15 years later, what colors are we going to try? Let's try platinum. So they gave us some platinum colors. And so every one of these documents has been an industry publication. All of it had a lot of response from practitioners, workshops, some heated discussions about the right way and the wrong way of doing things. And this concept was begun in the United States, but in reality, GBRs are now used in 25 countries around the world. And I would never have believed back in 95, when we wanted to keep the lawyers out of our business on the DC subway system, that it would grow to this. But Tim mentioned I was a vice president with the International Tunneling Association, and I had the ability to move around and meet different people in different countries and to enlighten them on what we were doing in the US, and it stuck. Hong Kong, and I was able to introduce them for the first time on a project in New Zealand, the European continent, South America. I can tell you that I've got a version of the Gold Book in Japanese right here on the bookshelf, and a copy of the Platinum Book is now being translated into Portuguese to be able to be applied on the Sao Paulo Metro in Brazil. So it's taking more and more momentum. So let's talk about surface versus underground construction. Surface works, very complicated construction, but very simple constraints. Gravity, wind, temperature. Gravity is reasonably constant on this planet, at least. And the rest of it is variable. You can work around it. There's a problem in the northeast corner of this site. You can move crew and equipment to the other side and mitigate the impact to the critical path of construction, which controls ultimate schedule and cost. Tunnels turn that whole system on your head. It's repetitive construction. It's complicated, but it's repetitive. It's sophisticated, but competitive. But very, very complicated constraints. Mother Nature is, for the geologists on the phone, are schizophrenic. She's schizophrenic. She'll change what you think you know, minute by minute, shove by shove, lift by lift, advance by advance. The other phenomenon is there's no other place to work if you hit a problem. It's a linear critical path. If that tunnel boring machine stops, there are no workarounds. And that became folklore in our tunneling business. And a guy named George Fox, every January before the Moles dinner at the New York Hilton, we have the George Fox Conference, named after the former president of Grow Tunneling, one of the godfathers of Manhattan tunneling. And because in New York, you've got these collective bargaining agreements that increase the cost of labor higher than anywhere else in this country, his expression was, if there's a delay, beware of the velocity of the loss. It'll take your breath away. And what he was saying was, if that tunnel boring machine or that tunneling advance stops, you're looking at anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 a day of lost cost. And so tunneling is different. There are different risks. The consequences are different, and therefore we need different contracting mechanisms to deal with the risks that are just not known for surface work construction. That's what was the originator of those 4 items that I talked about earlier on. Let's talk about some fundamentals. A typical foundation's geotech report focuses primarily on design issues, lateral earth pressures, coefficients of consolidation, with a few considerations of construction issues. A geotechnical baseline report is nothing like a foundation report. It focuses primarily on construction issues, not design, because construction is where the claims historically arise. Rarely do you have a differing site condition claim associated with a change in design. And the first documents that we wrote, we called them geotechnical design summary reports, and it was the wrong title. We changed the title to geotech baseline reports. But geotechs trained to write foundation reports will not know how to write a good GBR. And that's why we needed guidance, because a lot of the geotechs, me being one of them, needed to learn different skill sets, principally from the construction side of our industry, on what controls proper resolution of disputes and how to develop fair contracting. So the GBR serves 2 purposes. It provides a common basis for all bidders, what we call a level playing field, or I just gave a keynote in Perth, Australia last month, and there it's a level pitch, not a playing field. 2 is when a contractor submits a differing site condition claim, the measuring stick of what he should have priced is what's indicated in the geotechnical baseline report. It's not what was included in his bid. If he's entitled to bid below the baselines, as we call them, but he takes on commercial risk if he does so. It's not the owner's responsibility, it's the contractor's responsibility. So contracting principles, the GBR is it's not facts, it's a set of contractual assumptions. So the data is modified based on what we know, what happened on the job next door, data gaps in the boring information and the data in the laboratory. But it's fundamentally to establish a line in the sand. And on one side of that line, within the baselines, purely the contractor's risk. Means, methods, ground conditions. We told you to anticipate these types of conditions and these strengths. You've got to carry that risk. Conversely, on the other side, if it's beyond the baselines, if you encounter conditions that are more adverse than what we indicated, it's the owner's risk. And it boils down into this one sentence. The owner should expect to pay for all the ground conditions the contractor has to deal with on the project, whether we knew about it at time of bid or not. It's no more complicated than that. And that's a long sentence for defining what a fair contract is. The contractor has a right to be paid. He has a right to make a profit, and owners don't have a right to use the contract as a way of beating up the contractors, because the owners have a fixed budget that they can't exceed. Otherwise, we'll have to go to the board of directors. We've changed a lot of that thinking in a lot of the owners for major programs in this country. And it used to be that people would say, why do you have a geotechnical baseline report? Now the comment is separate. Why don't you have a geotechnical baseline report? And I know contractors in the tunneling industry, if there isn't a geotechnical baseline report in the contract, in the bid documents, they walk away from the bid. Applications. As GBRs evolved, it was realized that there are other things that are uncertain below the ground surface than just tunnels and shafts and chambers. And these applications include earthworks projects, dams, roadways, utility construction, cut and cover, also micro-tunneling and pipe jacking, and excavations for buildings and foundations. Some of the pictures to the right of the screen, you can see some of the applications where GBRs are used. Now, they may not be long reports as they are on tunnels. They may only be a couple of pages, but they can be just as effective to say, expect to encounter these conditions and these quantified parameters. And of course, ground modification. All the good ground is taken. Now we've got ground that settles, squeezes, leaks a lot of water. So you've got grouting, ground freezing. All of these things can be advised by baselines to help contractors bid a set of risks that they will ultimately have to carry. And I'll say that chapter 7, I'll show you an outline later of the Platinum Book, addresses these types of projects that are not tunnels, not shafts, but other types of applications for GBRs. So here's the Platinum Book table of contents. Talk a little bit evolution, improved contracting practices, some of the things I've talk to you about shortcomings of previous practice, lots of lessons learned. This is not a constitutive equation where if you plug in all the right variables, you get the same answer every time. It's on a totally different page. What are geotechnical data reports? What's their purpose? And how do geotechnical baseline reports interact with data reports? And why do they take precedent over an unlimited set of data necessarily? Talk about the differing site condition clause, the concept of a baseline. What it takes to write a GBR, it takes a village. If I read a geotechnical baseline report and it doesn't make a reference to plans or specifications, I know a geotech wrote it, and it's not going to be worth the paper it's written on. It tells me that the people who wrote it aren't aware of what's in the contract drawings and specifications, and a GBR is a contract document. It necessarily connects with other contract documents, and that discussion is carried here. Alternative delivery. We used to start with design, bid, build. Now we're getting into design, build, and progressive design, build. Chapter 7, applications of other excavations and foundations. Some contractual and legal considerations that begin to engage how GBRs are being applied around the world under different conditions of contract. 9 is roles and responsibilities of the parties who come to the contract. How are they expected to behave and act when there's a GBR that's defining risk allocation? And of course, lessons learned. Our entire civil engineering existence is about lessons learned. And every time we've published one of these things and people go out and apply them, there's feedback from their projects. Well, tunnel projects are very long wavelength. It takes a long time to complete them and develop the lessons learned. That's why the period of time between the first and the second and the third have been lengthy. And finally, we've got an appendix of about 19 or 20 case histories. Some of them are factual and transparent, and others are generic. They're not specific. They're unnamed, and they're done that way for a reason. But the lessons can still be learned. So I think that's probably it, Tim. I think maybe if I unshare my screen and I can go back to our previous version, and we can start with some discussion and Q&A.
No, that was good. I have a few things I wanted to talk to you about, and I do want to remind that our viewers that they have an opportunity to also submit their questions, and we'll include those as we go further into the show. But Randy, this is really incredible. Maybe, and you mentioned the differences between a baseline report versus what I think you called it a traditional geotechnical report. And my expectation is that a lot of our listeners are very familiar with a traditional geotechnical report, but you obviously are very familiar with a baseline, a geotechnical baseline report. Could you maybe in just a few sentences, just in layman's terms, tell us what you think is the most difference between the two?
Yeah, the biggest difference and the lesson learned is that the GBR is there to help administer claims. If we had X-ray vision, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be talking about GBRs. We wouldn't have a publication like this. The fact is we don't have GBRs, and I've got slides upon slides of animations that show you what happens when a fault in the ground isn't intercepted by a vertical boring, how damaging that can be. The design has already been done when you start writing a geotechnical baseline report. A foundation report or a classic geotechnical report starts with the data gathering, and then it goes to data interpretation, and it focuses primarily on how are we going to design this job? Are there soils? Are there rocks? Is there gas? Is there groundwater? Is there consolidation? Groundwater is important, but construction risk consolidation has been addressed. What we're concerned about is strengths, shear strengths, abrasivity, unconfined compressive strength. When you design a tunnel job, you don't care about the unconfined compressive strength. Maybe you are, because you can go with a thinner lining because the ground is more capable of supporting itself. And in the soft ground, you're going to have to put a support system in the tunnel as you create the opening. But you're not concerned about how soft. If it's a soil, you're going to design your lining a certain way, and you want modulus of subgrade reaction, you want Poisson's ratio. I don't care about that stuff in a GBR. There needs to be a way of saying, we've put all the design considerations in a basis of design report, and here it is available to you for information only, or a basis, or a basis of design report. Or frankly, I don't like the term reports because contractors like to play the confused game. Well, you gave me all these reports. I didn't know what to rely on. So in the tunneling industry, we call it a geotechnical memorandum for design. It's a memorandum. It's a memo. These are the parameters that we've quantified, and this is how we think it's going to affect lateral earth pressures and bearing capacities. It's a whole different realm than once you've got it designed, now someone has to come build it. It's an entirely different set of data. And in the early days, we thought we had to baseline every piece of data we had, and we don't. No one's ever going to use Poisson's ratio or modulus of subgrade reaction or active earth pressure coefficient to defend a differing site construction claim. That's the difference.
If you could accomplish, if you had a magic wand and you could accomplish one thing with all the work you've done to this point and this book, what would that one thing be, Randy?
And it's really all three books, and it starts with my career.
I mentioned all the work you've done, plus you've done all this other work in the past. So what would you, if you could change our practice from today on, what would that one thing be?
It would be to alter owners' attitudes, that the contractor is not the enemy. He is your partner. And the more effectively you can get along and develop contract documents you can agree on and act reasonably so that you get your job built on time and hopefully under budget, and the contractor lives another day to bid the next job that you put out on the street. That's it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's music to my ears, and I'm sure it's music to the ears of many, many contractors who are really what that they live for is an equitable opportunity to construct things, because that's what they do. They love that. Okay, so you'd mentioned that your book has some case histories. Was one at the forefront of your mind where the baseline geotechnical report made the difference?
There are probably a dozen or so. Let me consider a few. One was I had the pleasure of, I wasn't working with Mott, I was working with Woodward Clyde in the day, and I had the pleasure of living in New Zealand for a year and a half, introducing Geotechnical Baseline Reports for the first time in that country on what was called the Second Manipuri Tail Race Tunnel Project. You understand that when you're making, as the Brits call it, aluminium, you cook bauxite. And they built this 700 megawatt underground power station on the south tip of the South Island of New Zealand, and they brought bauxite over from Australia to cook the bauxite to create pellets that were then shipped elsewhere to manufacture aluminum. This power tunnel, 700 megawatt power tunnel, 7 shafts going down, turning Francis turbines, then turning water out a 6.5 mile tail race tunnel, call it the exhaust pipe. Well, something during the design underestimated what the roughness coefficient, the Manning coefficient, the rugosity factor on that tail race tunnel, and this 700 megawatt system could only push 550 megawatt. We won the contract to be able to go down there and basically give a 700 megawatt power station straight pipes, dual exhaust. Those of us who grew up with cars on our brain, and I did, the key on a V8 was to provide these straight pipes with thrush mufflers or glass packs, whatever you wanted to call it, headers. Well, we did this to a 700 megawatt underground power station, and you had to match the soffit because these generators have what's a phenomenon called hunting, and you can cause discordant interference in the generators if they see destructive interference coming from downstream, different from upstream. Well, it was a 6.5-mile tunnel bored with the largest TBM at the time in the world. It was about 33 feet in diameter, hard rock, very hard rock. And the rock had marbled structure to it. And because the workers, the contractor, we flew the contractors down, we gave them $25,000 to bring their management personnel down to the job site, and they saw the rock. Well, that rock had a lesson learned built into it. And if you ever looked at the spokes of a rock TBM in Chicago, designed by a company called Robbins, you saw that the disc cutters on the cutter wheel were in a logarithmic spiral. Right? That's not the cheapest way to manufacture a hard rock tunnel boring machine cutter head. It's cheaper to engineer them in spokes. Well, what happens when you've got ledges of hard and soft rock and the radius of cutters hits that rock at the same time? There's a reaction back into the cutter head and back into the hydraulics, and it was causing cracking of the cutter seats that was housing these 60 or 70 cutters on the face of this rotating tunnel boring machine. Well, the contractor went to the manufacturer and said, I've got a problem. But what do we do about it? And the manufacturer of the TBM said, that's an operational issue. That's because the rock is so hard. And the only way to mitigate that damage is to back off on your thrust per cutter. Well, that meant back off on your penetration rate. That meant back off on your advance rate. And the job finished 1.5 years late. We had a dispute review board provision on that job, and there was a 21-day dispute review board hearing in New Zealand. And we had set baselines of what the rock strength would be. We had warnings about the marbled conditions in the GBR. The contractors were required to tour the underground opening to see that marbling. And at the end of the day, not one baseline of relevant physical condition was ever exceeded, as documented by lots of borings and samples, not borings, but cores into the wall of the TBM opening, the bore opening, and none of the baselines were ever exceeded. The differing site condition clause says you have to have relied on a parameter of a subsurface contract indication that has been exceeded and that therefore you've been damaged. If the thresholds were not exceeded, remember that line in the sand to that one side within the baselines is the contractor's risk. Contractor got a valuation of zero cost for his claim. 21-day dispute review board hearing. And it got people to focus, respect the baselines. They're there for a reason. So there are a number of other jobs that I could talk about, but that one stands out maybe because I discovered Sauvignon Blanc wine from the Marlborough region in the northeast corner of the South Island. Maybe that's why this thing retains.
I think it's kind of interesting that you brought that one up because it protected the owner in that case. Yeah. You would mention protecting the contractor, but it really protects them both. Right.
Well, let me give you another one. In this one, I wasn't the designer. I was the member of the dispute review board, and it was a water tunnel in Utah. And the owner had put out a bid for the traditional design bid build. And they also entertained a design build alternative. And this one contractor came along and developed this different approach. And they wrote a different geotechnical baseline report. Because the elements of construction were different and some of the ground terrain was different. And it would very quickly became apparent that while the original design would have been in a different configuration farther away from aerials in the valley wall, and the new tunnel was actually directly beneath something called Stinking Springs, that this tunnel would encounter methane gas, explosive methane gas, highly corrosive methane gas. And when they found what the conditions were, and they were not reported in the Geotechnical Baseline Report, rightfully or wrongfully, the job of a dispute review board is to administer the contract, not place Solomon. Everything the contractor had to do to overcome those ground conditions was a change clause, and the owner recognized it and agreed with it, and said, I need to get this job done. I can't sit here and debate and throw darts at each other in a court of law. I mean, the DRB set the stage, and we said, this is all a material change to what was written in the contract. So the door swings both ways, and contractors respect that fact. I just wish that owners would too.
Those are great examples. Randy, we've got some questions from our viewers. I'll show you the first one. It's what were the key changes from your guidelines that were published in 1997 to, and I'll skip to now. What would you say was the fundamental change, or what were the fundamental changes?
Well, there are lots of changes, and you're taxing my memory going back that far, but I would say that one of the more significant changes is the form of contract delivery. During the Yellow Book period, work was always traditional design bid build. The owner retained a designer, they retained a construction manager, they put out a 100% design. Unfortunately, they had to guess at what the means and methods would be. There's two types of baselines, and this would take another lecture. There are physical baselines, which are intrinsic properties of the ground, whether you use method A, B, or C to build it. The ground is there, it's been there for millions of years. It's not going to change. Then there are behavioral baselines. If you're building a subway station and you can build it with a tunnel boring machine, the things you're going to talk about relating to ground behavior are totally different. And what determines success versus Achilles' heel is totally different for a mechanized tunnel boring machine versus a sequential excavation method, whether it's in soil or rock or mixed face. Ground conditions are still the same. Impacts to constructability are totally different. We realized that owners in design bid build were guessing at what the means and methods could be. And contractors were coming in and proposing subtleties, different changes, and the GBR wasn't reflecting them. So one big lesson we learned is make sure that the behavioral baselines are as closely connected to what the contractor will actually do on the job. And this became more and more available to the process as we went from design bid build into design build, whereas people could write the GBR as the contractor was presenting his approach to the job. And now in progressive design build, you can get the contractor on that much earlier. And now what we're talking about is that the owner and the contractor collaboratively prepare the Geotechnical Baseline Report. And this need to stamp it with a registered PE, it's not fact, it's contractual assumption. So one of the things I'm trying to offer is that you don't need a registered professional engineer stamp on it. What you need is the signature of the owner and the contractor as a charter that we're going to use this document that we have jointly prepared to build this job. I think that's what the future is, and that we talk about it in the Platinum Book. Another major change is that because GBRs have grown from North America to elsewhere around the world, the Platinum Book talks about means of contracted. It's more of a contractual perspective of what is the basis for additional compensation. We use the CFR Federal Differing Site Condition Clause. The Brits use something different. It's called NEC 3.4. FIDIC has something different. And the question is, how do you adapt GBRs to different forms of contract around the world? I think those are majors. And I could go on for an hour talking about the minors, but let's go to the next question.
No, you did really well. So I'm going to step back because you answered this one in part, but I think it's worth expanding on it a little bit. You brought up the fact that you said something about I don't know that it needs to be a geotechnical engineer, but I think the contractor should be involved. So you've been around this enough. What kind of experience would be beneficial for someone writing a GBR?
That's a really good question, and it's a focus. It was a minor focus in the gold book, and it's a major focus in the platinum book. Also, in the platinum book, we get down to dirty because geotechs like to write master's theses. I've had to review 140-page GBRs, and everyone is getting tired of having a report written like a technical term paper be, as I'll say, repetitive, redundant, and duplicative, saying the same thing more than once. And a geotech will easily do that without knowing it. But when you're writing a contract document, you say it once. Art Chase, my first employer was the Al Matthews Company in Rockville, Maryland. I worked for Art Chase. And he said, write it one time, write it the best way you can, and get off it. And geotechs don't know how to write a contract specification. It takes a group of individuals. It takes an engineering geologist who comes to the job and says, all right, this is the ground model. This is what Mother Nature we think has given us. And there are some geologic hazards in here that we should be considering when we implement the site investigation program. We also know that some of those hazards will not be captured by the data. You can't determine what the boulder volume percentage will be in the excavation by drilling borings. I drilled a Staten Island when I was with Woody Clyde. I was involved with a colleague, and we drilled like 700 borings. And we told the driller, we're in a ground moraine. In fact, we're in a terminal moraine, and listen for drill chatter in the boring in the drill rig, the hollow stem augers. We had drill chatter half a dozen times, and we encountered dozens of boulders during the construction. So be careful of what you don't know. Starting with the ground model is important, and that engineering geologist will tell you what you think you've learned and what you haven't learned yet, but the ground model tells you will be there nonetheless, like contamination, like boulders, like faults. If you go to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, there's something called a Horst and Graben drop complex. It's a geologic structure. There are vertical shears. Tell me how effective you think vertical borings are going to be finding vertical shears, even if you tilt them at a 20-degree angle. In this case, that groundwater in those vertical shears contains hydrogen sulfide gas in solution. When that stuff volatilizes in the opening, it doesn't make you queasy. It knocks out your olfactory senses, and then you die. It's rotten egg smell. It's totally different than methane gas. A ground model will tell you what the risks are up ahead. So, engineering geologist, geotech engineer implements the geotech exploration program, interprets the data for design purposes, but also interprets the data for constructability purposes. Someone who understands construction means and methods. They've got tunnel boring machines, drill and blast, road headers, sequential excavation, all this dirt under the fingernail, because they know where the trip hazards are going to be, and they know what to write about under the construction considerations portions of the job. Then you've got the entity who developed the plans and specifications. What can control a differing site condition isn't born solely in the Geotechnical Baseline Report. If you've got a tunnel boring machine and you're drilling holes out ahead because you expect a lot of groundwater coming into the ground, they're going to say expect permeable ground, and if flow at the face exceeds a certain threshold of inflow, specification X will require you to drill probe holes, and then eventually, if it gets higher, fan grouting in a pattern that is described in the specification Y and is shown on drawing B. And the payment provisions are in payment provision X. Well, now you build the job. The GBR is just the introduction. The GBR doesn't paraphrase the drawings or the specs or the payment provision. It says, go here for this, here for that, here for that. The amount of grout the contractor is expected to pump in actuality is 3 times what was shown in the original bid form. That's a material difference. That's a basis for the differing site condition. You need to have someone who's prepared the plans and specs, review the GBR to say, you need to reference this spec because it includes very important things about what you're discussing. And the geotech typically doesn't have that role or responsibility. They're the lowest rung of the totem pole, and a larger engineering design firm will do the work, and the geotech will go out and drill the borings and develop the geotechnical data report and be involved in the GBR. So you need someone who understands the plans and specs. Finally, you need someone like a dispute review board member to say, these are the things that wind up in dispute. And I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. And do you think you're going to encounter this? Have you covered it? Have you countered this? Have you covered it? If we're going through a utility maze in a surface works city, I was just involved in this under Queen Street in Toronto, the Ontario line. I said, we ought to make a table that says, these are all the things that you could encounter during the excavation as a job. The first column is what is baselined, and the second column is don't assume any of that occurrence. If you encounter any of this or this or this or this, we have provisional sums that will pay you for those separately. So it takes like 5 different categories of expertise to write a well-written GBR. And I'll tell you that in the Platinum book, we say, this is the outline that you should follow, because people have written things that like to reinvent the wheel over and over again. And they write things that are off the mark and they're way too long. So we've gotten specific in the Platinum book and said, this is the outline you should follow. And these are the page counts that we think are a good guideline for talking about what you want to talk about. And from my memory, the worst case example that I've ever written was 47 to 52 pages, plus tables, figures, and plots. If a consultant is delivering a 100-page GBR, they need to be taken somewhere and trained, because they're writing too much. Short and sweet, concise, to the point, just the way a spec is written. And these are the lessons that you learn when you're writing a contract document, not something that's for information only. And it takes, as I say, it takes a village of expertise to make sure you've got it right. It's a very, very complicated thing to do. It's a very difficult report to write. Make sure you got the right expertise around the table when you set out.
It sounds like great advice. I mean, I can only think that you've talked about it in terms of primarily tunnels, but the baseline report, as projects get, larger and larger, which they are, and the risks, the allocation, I mean, frankly, it's coming more and more to the forefront. I think we'll see these in a lot of different projects to a greater degree.
Absolutely. Contractors bid these documents with their lawyers at their side.
That's
the business.
That's upon us now. It's just a matter of now it takes time to react. But Randy, this was great information, and I'm sure that our viewers found this introduction to your guidelines and very, very interesting. Let me see. Do we have? We've got one more. We've got another question. I think we've got time for this. This one just rolled in. What are your thoughts on the value of GBRs on bridge projects?
Bridges. Absolutely. Once again, I-70 bridge over the Missouri River at St. Charles. My client was Bart Bartholomew. He was the president of Fruin Kalnan Construction Company at the time. Missouri is the only state in the union that does not have a differing site condition clause in their contracts. So your basis for claim can't be the differing site condition clause. It's you breach your promise of implied warranty that the data, the information in your boring logs was going to be accurate. So here was a bridge, and it was the very first time in this country that we used what's called German technology called a Hochstrasser cathead. I know this because I was living in Oakland and had to commute to Aspen for 7 years to design the Glenwood Canyon tunnels east of Glenwood Springs. And one of the bridges coming off of one of the decks of one of the tunnels had these Hochstrasser catheads to sink the piers to support the bridge spans. So the bridge, it's structural. I guess it's a good question whether or not there's anything you need to baseline in the way of wind for harmonics. Everybody knows the Tacoma Narrows Bridge theory phenomenon, the destruction where resonance because of wind going through the canyon struck a natural frequency in the bridge, and the bridge started going crazy, and it eventually fell apart. Classic engineering discussion. But relative to the foundations, if the foundations are delayed, the entire bridge job is delayed. And you may say it's only a small portion of the capital cost, but it's an absolutely dead critical portion of the capital cost. So make sure you've got your foundation ground conditions represented wherever you are, whether it's state of Missouri or somewhere else where you got the differing site condition for case. But I don't think, people say, well, how small is too small to need a GBR? And I say, if you've got a concern that your overall project budget could exceed your plan by 25 or 30%, and that scares you, you need a geotechnical baseline report, because chances are all the risks are going to be in the ground. And the reality is it's a terrible false economy, because if it's a bridge job, that GBR doesn't need to be more than a couple of pages long. False economy to say, oh, I don't need it. We don't have that kind of a job. I've had lots of instances where there was a multi-billion-dollar East Side Access project in Long Island. Started off in a Bellmouth in Queens, and someone said, well, do we really need a GBR for the slurry walls? I said, absolutely. If those slurry walls don't anchor into the ground below it, and you've got water leakage, you're going to have a claim, and it's going to stop the progression of the entire, what's now known as Grand Central Madison. If you've been in New York, go look at it. There are massive caverns that are well below what was the bottom of Grand Central Terminal, which happens to be the largest rail terminal in the world. But it all started with the Bellmouth. You couldn't build anything else until you created that slurry wall where the contractor could launch his operation. They eventually wrote a GBR for that open excavation, and there were disputes about it because the ceiling where the sheeting or the diaphragm walls hit the ground was an imperfect seal, and there was leakage and there was delay. I can't imagine what it would have been without a GBR. Would have been much worse.
Another great illustration. Randy, I think that answers all the questions we have at least all the questions we have now from our viewers. Thank you for your willingness to share your time and your knowledge in your book and on this podcast.
Tim, I'd like to clarify.
Sure, go ahead.
It's not my book. I mothered this process from A to B to C, and I was actually the principal author of the two versions because we agreed it should read like one person wrote it. So I would take all the input, and I was the scrivener, and then we put it out to the industry to critique. And when we got to the Platinum book, there was so much other input that was coming from others. I said, I'm not going to say I'm the author, I'm the editor. But it's an industry publication, and I think there's probably, if you look at the population of the steering committee people, and these were lawyers and contractors and owners and engineers and engineering geologists, there were probably 30 people who helped guide in a committee, ASCE task committee, among these three documents. So I was the scrivener, I was the team leader, but I think it's the industry's publication. It's not my publication. I've just had the pleasure of being involved a long time.
Thank you for making that clarification. And I mean, the fact that, such a technical subject, and that you did take the initiative and were involved in combining it all and presenting to us. I mean, we're all grateful for that. So thank you. I will make a note that the Deep Foundation Institute is also working on a position paper for GBRs, and I'm heavily involved in the DFI, and everything that you've said today is music to my ears. I'm for a number of reasons that we didn't go into. I think it's GBRs are going to be more and more embraced in all sorts of different areas of ground construction. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Christina, who's going to wrap us up. Thanks again, Randy.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you, team, for moderating this great conversation. As our viewers, I feel very identified with this talk. When we are in the industry, reporting is really important. And sometimes someone start the geotechnical work and then another company continues. So sometimes have the document clear can communicate to other people. So so thank you so much. Thank you to the Construction Institute for publishing this manual practice. As the Construction Institute, the Geo-Institute, this is a very valuable publication. So Randy, thank you for your time. Again, great experience, like so much, like not only in the tunneling, which is very challenged, like when you have faults or the ground is could be very challenged. So thank you for your words. As you guys may know, we have in the Geo-Institute, we have technical committees and we have the underground engineering and construction. I feel very related like with this interview today. So I will pass this information to the committee as well. To our viewers, thank you for being here, for staying with us, for watching this interview. We have more live stream coming up. I think very soon. I think next week or so we have another live stream. I don't know where I have my notes. But coming up, the Geo-Congress, we plan to live stream as well our lectures. So please stay tuned with our social media, our LinkedIn account, and our emails going out. So thank you everybody for staying here. I wish everybody a great day. And after this excellent talk, I hope this was very useful for everybody. So thank you again. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, team. Thank you, Leslie, for being here. Our producer, Aurora, behind the scene. Thank you so much. And wish everybody a great day. Bye-bye.